Alors, bonjour et bienvenue à Imagination. Aujourd'hui, on rencontre Antony Hickling qui va parler de son film Down in Paris.
Well, bienvenue à Imagination. This
Merci.
afternoon, we're going to have a wonderful conversation with Antony Hickling, the director of Down in Paris, with Michael Belcher. Let me say a few words about Michael. He is a writer, a playwright, and importantly for us, our stellar synopsis creator. Those beautiful words that you see on the website, that you see in the catalog, are thanks to this man's beautiful talent. So please take it away, Michael.
Yes, so I'm very excited to be talking to you, Anthony, because, first off, congratulations, but in a festival full of wonderful films, yours was a standout for me. It was one of my favorites.
Wow.
So I found it both poignant and playful, and was able to kind of go back and forth between those modes. So I want to start with the poignant side. So anxiety, especially when it comes to creation, seems to be at the heart of the film. So I'm just wondering, what did you want to capture or investigate about this often debilitating condition and its impact on the main character, Richard?
And its impact. Okay, so hi everyone, bonjour à tout le monde. I just wanted to just quickly say thank you for inviting me to the festival and thank you for coming to see the film. Merci beaucoup. So to go back to your question, to be totally honest, one of the starting points for the film was a film that I made before called Where Horses Go to Die, and that film was really, it was quite a hard shoot. It was very difficult. There was a lot of studio, and obviously I'm working without hardly any finance, so it was a really difficult. And in actual fact, in that film, there was a scene where, but it was a scene in off rather than a scene in the film. It was a scene of me directing it, and I actually had a huge panic attack. I went into the toilet. I thought I was going to faint. It was just really difficult. And I didn't realize there was one of the actors in the toilets who opened the door and saw the whole thing. And she was like, "Oh my God, are you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm fine." And then went back and the shoot carried on. And that specific moment of anxiety during a shoot, of I don't think I can pull this off, of I've eaten more than I can chew, of what the hell am I doing? That is the starting point of this film. So I took that moment, that very real moment, and used that anxiety in order then to go elsewhere, which I think the film does. What Sorry, can we just go back to the question?
Yeah, what did you want to work through? So anxiety is this kind of stepping off point, and then what did you want to reveal about how anxiety works? How do people approach it? Like, what did you want to work through in that?
I think sort of, if I come back to the heart of the film, and excuse me if I'm looking for answers, because actually, because of COVID and everything, I haven't actually had to speak about the film. So these questions you're asking me are complete virgin territory. I've not had to talk about why I did this or what, so I'm actually thinking about it and saying it sort of firsthand, really, for real. But in actual fact, I think, sort of to go to the heart of it, what I wanted to do is represent a very real person, and little by little, like peeling an orange or peeling back, reveal who this person was. And the starting point for that was this anxiety, was this difficulty within the creative process, but also within life itself, because ultimately you might be a director, or you might be an actor, or you might work in an office, or whatever it may be. You're human, and we have very human, and we all go through very difficult periods in our lives. So, and this anxiety affects us all, whether you're in art or not. And I think I just wanted to explore that, and the things that I'd personally been through, linked to what I thought, maybe, is this my midlife crisis? Is this what we talk about? I'm 46 now. Am I going through what I've heard about my whole life? When you get to your 40s, you're going to have it's like, is this it? But it was related to the creative side. But as you see in the film, it was also related to very personal, real things, sort of death of parents. And on top of it all, we were filming during COVID. So people were actually dying. It's like the Black Plague was actually happening, you know? So why did I want to explore that? I can't really answer, but I did. I was going through that. So
Yeah.
I always use as starting points generally what I know. And what I know is either what I've lived or what I'm going through, or you know, and because it was about a director and a real person, I suppose I wanted to go through that darkness and I wanted to explore it in order to come out of it, in order to let it go, in order to move on.
Mhm. Yeah, and you mentioned that kind of, I mean, the recent death, there seems to be it's a corrosive relationship with an ex, with Frederic. What makes there's an incident where Richard and his ex meet on the street, and in terms of anxiety, in terms of what he's going through, why does his ex create such a strong reaction in him?
Uh, well, it's difficult because in actual fact, the film is so personal. So for me to answer your question, I have to tell you that, well, I don't have to, but it doesn't make sense if I don't. It's like that is an incident that happened to me with my last relationship. I mean, I think it's quite obvious when you watch it that it's very personal,
Mm,
you know? But I mean, won't go into all the details of that relationship, but I was in a relationship in the end, which lasted for about a few years, maybe, which was very destructive. And the person that I was with was like an emotional, I mean, I loved him dearly, don't get me wrong, but he was like
mm,
an emotional vampire. And little by little, what became beautiful, actually a beautiful relationship, started to turn sour. And when I say, you know, j'ai donné, il m'a vidé, le mec, il m'a vidé,
mm,
that's how I felt. I came away from that relationship feeling like it was actually the first time in my life that I was in a relationship where I was ready to give everything. So I think it was the first time I'd ever really been in love, where actually that person was more important than me. But
mm,
that person was actually happy to take and take and take, because I realized now that person was in a depression.
mm,
When you live with a depressed person, sometimes, or in this case, it was take, take, take to the point that I actually didn't have anything left to give. And I might add that little by little, as we got further into the relationship, I realized, which I did not know, that the person was actually addicted to chemsex. So
okay.
he would disappear for days. I think he was dead.
Mm,
It was just a whole thing that was really intense. And one time towards the end of the relationship, I had his keys. I wanted my keys back, and we had this huge fight in the street. And this is a guy that's, you know, it's actually quite a very respectable. We had a huge fight over these keys, and that the reason I'm telling you that is because that was the inspiration for that scene, and that relationship, that scene is quite cathartic. And for me, when I watch it with my eyes, it's it's seeing my ex in the street, because it's funny you mentioned that scene, because I've had before, oh, I don't understand why he explodes, you know, but you know,
I do.
sometimes at the end of a relationship, I think you can identify on a certain level, you know, not everybody becomes best buddies. I mean, it can, you know, and it does happen. So why does it do that to Richard? Because I was trying to write about, I was trying to be truthful. So
Mm.
in order to be truthful, I recreated something that I'd lived through. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but
Yeah, and what's interesting, it's making me also see, because his ex like bleeds him dry, is how you're putting it. Like it's interesting how when Richard becomes depressed, he almost starts to do that to other people too. So like it's
mm.
interesting that it becomes like a cycle. Like
What,
he
that's interesting. What do you mean? But give me an example.
well, I feel like what I mean, I don't want to give too much away, but I feel like the
No.
film, it has to take you down in Paris. It has to take you
Yeah,
down before you come back up, and
absolutely.
it seems like at first some of the characters he runs into, like Elizabeth or even the woman on the street after this fight who says like I don't like arguments, that at first he seems quite negative with them, but then works through it and is able
Yeah,
to
yeah, yeah,
connect with
yeah.
them.
That's true. That's true. I think that's very obvious with Elizabeth at the beginning. Um, I think, for example, saying the taxi, or no, I think that is totally it's totally the case with Elizabeth.
Mm.
But I think afterwards, maybe it is still the case, but there is this sort of generosity as it moves on. There's
For
this
sure.
exchange between the characters, like the girl in the taxi that comes, but you know, she helps him, and then later on he'll help the guy in the kebab shop. There's
Mhm.
like this. Hopefully, it's humane. C'est la humanité, quoi.
Oh,
C'est ça que je voulais
oui,
transmettre.
oui.
C'est ce côté humain, quoi. Mais la compassion, l'amour, c'est ça. Je voulais aller vers ça dans tous les cas. Je voulais aller vers ces choses saines. Je voulais aller vers la compassion de l'autre, l'amour, l'échange, l'entraide. Bon,
Mm.
bref.
Yeah, and yeah, you can see that. Yeah, like you're saying, as you go, he kind of learns to open back up through
Yeah,
all of these different
yeah.
experiences. And one of the things that I notice is that you touch upon Richard's sexuality throughout. I mean, his relationship to sex, his relationship to his body,
Mm.
and he seems a bit, at least at first, because this is something he ends up working through. Is like he seems at first a little detached from his body, maybe because of this relationship. You mentioned this kind of addiction that might have been the impetus of it. Do you feel like that might be adding to his anxiety, this detachment from his body, or how he deals with
Mm.
sex?
So, okay, I think that's interesting. I myself have to detach from the question because there's like
Mm,
le côté un peu psy où tu me poses la question parce que je joue le rôle, donc j'ai écrit, donc en même temps on parle de moi.
mhm,
Et de l'autre côté, c'est Richard, donc un personnage que je joue. Et I think that on one level, um, yeah, I think on one level, the relationship that he's lived through has added to that anxiety or did maybe detachment to his body. But on another level, I think the character of Richard, but this is where it gets complicated because I'm thinking, oh gosh, am I actually talking about myself here?
Look, it
I
can be
suppose
both.
I am, and
Conflation.
Richard.
It's conflation.
Exactly, you're like drawing it out here.
Yeah.
No, seriously, I think it's the character, it's in relation to his past. It's also clearly who he is. And in a way, I suppose I could say to a certain extent, although I am clear about the fact I'm playing a role.
Mm,
However, there is a lot of me in that role, not only in the writing, in the acting. And I think the relationship I have personally with my own body and my own sexuality links into what you're saying, which is, you
mm,
know, 7 years of psychanalyse. But the thing is, which I've already done, by the way, but so that's over. But the point is, yeah, I think that is in there. But I think, and what I tried to show within that scene is also not, for example, because if we talk about the sex club, for example, there's Richard's relationship with sex, with his own body. And then there's also the relationship he has with the characters within the scene. So, for example, the first character, who's a very beautiful guy,
mm,
has this sort of sexuality, which is a little bit, he's very easy with his body, he's beautiful, he's much freer, he's less complexed, you know, which is great. However, Richard, who is a bit coincé, he's a little bit un peu mal à l'aise, en même temps il veut baiser, mais en même temps il n'ose pas, il vient de commencer avec le prep. It's also sorts of questions that I've had, like when I started taking the prep, I didn't quite know when to sort of have sex without condom, and then
mm,
suddenly with a condom, and then suddenly not to have use one, and then there's a whole scene within the gay scene anyway, the gay male scene within sex clubs and within parties, within chemsex and all this that isn't often in films. It is in there, and it is in a. There's been a lot of documentaries and all the rest of it, but it's not necessarily we talk about that much. And sometimes, you know, we're not allowed to be. We're not allowed to be sort of want to put the condoms on or want to be. We have to be, you know, bareback and we're for this and actual, sometimes there are other diseases out there. There are, and sometimes it's actually okay to
mm,
protect yourself, to look after yourself. So I wanted to convey that. And I also wanted to convey sometimes from the other point of view, the people that are so liberated, sometimes there's that sexuality, which sometimes is a bit, you know, it's difficult. It's not as easy as it seems for everyone. It's not those worlds, whether it be saunas, and sometimes you feel really nervous and uncomfortable, and you don't know what to say, and you don't know because the other person makes you feel like that. I should be totally cool and open-minded and not have to worry about that, but it worries me. So I just wanted to create debate. But it's a film, it's a fiction, but this is why I touched on that subject. And then he moves into meeting these two guys, and suddenly there aren't any problems, and Richard himself relaxes and they're relaxed. And in actual fact, which is actually a threesome and a very happy couple, and they have this sort of, what I find is a very relaxed, loving, it's fun, it's there are no complexes, and I wanted to have that side of it. And I purposely didn't get the gorgeous model and all that. Not that I've got anything against that. I just wanted, for the scene where it went really well, I just wanted real people. I just wanted just every day, not the model, and nothing against Vinicius, who's gorgeous, and but I just wanted to show that in the film. I wanted to show it as a message. I just wanted to say, I mean, I think that's clear. I hope it is.
Oh, it is, and I mean, I really appreciated that complexity, because often you feel like maybe that you're stunted because you're not just jumping into things all the time, and you're like, it's nice that there's a navigation where you don't have to say yes or be happy with absolutely everything. You can kind of move on to the next thing, and then when you find that comfort, then it can be really fun, like you said. So
yeah, once you relax and feel safe, once you feel safe, then you can relax. When you don't feel safe, that's when the anxieties come out. That's when you feel uncomfortable. And I a little point in that scene, which for me is quite strong personally, is when he ends that sexual relationship with that first guy, and he bangs his head against the wall. Every time I watch that, it really, I mean, I know I'm watching myself, but it really strikes me personally that when sometimes you just can't express, or you're angry at yourself because you can't be the relaxed, cool person that you should be, and you're on prep, it just sort of speaks to me. So hopefully that comes across anyway.
Oh, 100%. It was a stand. That was like a moment in the film where I fully could just like that one, like without words, I could tell exactly how he was feeling.
Oh, good.
So this moment that we're talking about is kind of towards the end of a single night. I mean, the film takes place over the course of a single night, a dark night of the soul, as it were. Did you know from the start that you wanted to work within this time constraint, and what does the constraint itself do for your filmmaking?
Well, to be honest, yeah, I think quite early on I knew I wanted it to be one night. What does that do? I think it just condenses everything, and it simplifies everything. I just wanted it short and simple. I wanted it to be accessible, because the thing is, this is my 5th film. So the fact is, I've done other stuff which has been a bit more difficult to deal with. So I wanted to come back to something. I mean, I was ready to start to attack. I mean, I'm initially an actor. I was a sort of trained actor initially. So I wanted to come back to drama. I wanted to come back to text. So it's like, right, let's do something simple. Let's do something accessible, and doesn't totally alienate the spectator. And let's condense it into one evening. The difficulty with the idea of one evening, which hopefully we've pulled off, is that you're watching it and thinking all these things could not possibly happen in one night, and you don't go with it, you go against it. I mean, that might be the case with some people, but that was the danger of doing it in one night, because so many extraordinary in the ordinary, or the extraordinary in the ordinary. So many things happen which together you could be like, look, I'm not following this. It's not credible. It's not, because the style is quite realistic apart from certain scenes.
Surreal because of that real aspect.
Yeah, but I think we sort of managed it by the way we filmed it. We edited it, for many reasons. But just to add to that point, I must say that it wasn't the film that I was meant to. Yeah, it was the film I was meant to make, because it's the one that I made. But it wasn't the film that I wanted to make next. This film down in Paris, I didn't have the title at that point, but it was something I wanted to do a bit later, in a couple of a couple of movies down the line. But the film that I wrote with basically the same actors, the two leads were Dominic Fro and Bouvet, and the guy Claudius with the tattoo. But an adaptation of a play, a thriller, and I'd written the first draft of that, and then I wanted to do that next. And because of finance or lack of finance, I realized I couldn't do it without a proper budget. So I had to put that to one side. And rather than wait years to get another budget, I decided to try and write a film that was much simpler, that was much easier. And what I realized today is that film has now become the bridge between what I did before and what I'm going on to make. I didn't know that at the time, but I know that now. So yeah, it was also a film that I knew that I could make with a very small budget. I didn't write it for me to play the lead at all. That came later down the line. The lead, I thought about Geoffrey Coué, so the premier assistant. I thought about him. I thought about Gaëtan Vétier, who played the lead in Little Gay Boy, but a younger, more sort of branché, si tu veux, rather than sort of, I didn't have any desire to play the role at all. And then, sorry, I'm actually going off the subject now.
No, it's perfect.
Okay.
No, because like I was going to ask this later, just because it seems so perfect for you. Like, I mean, it just they have like this kind of screen presence where it's just very relatable. Like I was able to kind of relate to the character as a human rather than as an actor playing a human.
Yeah.
It just seemed like that you had done it specifically to reflect this new chapter. So it's interesting that it yet gonna happen.
Well, I suppose life ultimately is, and I look back now and it couldn't be more perfect because this sort of bridge, and me playing the role, but at the time it was not where I wanted to go. But the script, the whatever you want to call it, sort of decided. I mean, I think all my films have been like that. It's you start working, you have an idea, and I think we all worked like that to a certain extent. And then the film itself demanded, ça m'a demandé de le faire en fait, si tu veux. C'est le film qui a fait que ça peut être que moi qui le joue. Et si tu veux quelque part, c'est que le côté, par exemple, le côté anglais-français, on pourrait pas faire ça autrement. On pourrait faire, mais il faut trouver quelqu'un déjà qui parle les deux et puis bref. And then what I loved in the end, because since I started making films, I've let acting go. I mean, I still act to earn money, to live. However, I've not wanted to act in any of my films, and I didn't want to act in this one. I just like being behind the camera. But because we realized in the writing it, it was obviously based on very real stuff. So it sort of just made sense. We can have him speaking 2 languages in the scene. We can have, and what I actually ended up loving about the fact that I play the role is, and I've loved that in all my films up until now, are layers. I love layers in films. And this idea of, okay, you're playing the role, but you are actually a director. You are actually shooting your own movie. You are actually, I just adding these layers, and certain lines suddenly had because imagine it was written for someone else, which it was. I mean, obviously then it was modified, but it wouldn't have the same connotations about certain points. It would just be an act. But because I have made the 5 films, because they're the questions that I am asking about my own movie, I just love the layers, and I like that in movies that I watch. So
I was
as it was meant to be.
Yeah, no, I was talking to one of the directors of I was talking to Kat Setzer, and just saying like, this is like, if I could concoct the perfect movie for myself, this would be it. It has everything that I love in film and everything that film can do. So like, I love looking at layers just in terms of inspiration. So I don't know if any of these were inspirations, but I saw things like Alice in Wonderland with the idea of like down the rabbit hole, down in Paris, and A Christmas Carol, Woody Allen's Midnight in Paris, which I love.
Yeah.
And then I've seen other people compare it to Dante's Divine Comedy. I saw someone compare it to Scorsese's After Hours. For you, beyond whether those are actual things that you were inspired by, what were you inspired in the writing and directing? Is there works that you were channeling in any
Mm.
way?
Well, to be honest, I think I did mention during the writing for sure. It's not this is the movie I want to make, but I did mention it to the co-writer at the very beginning when we put the first draft is 8.5 8 et demi de Fellini.
Mm.
That was definitely in there, and I've never mentioned it to anyone, but it's got picked up in a few reviews. And then in Paris, and it's being screened on Wednesday, they've mentioned Clio 5 à 7 by Agnès Varda.
Mm.
Clio 5 till 7 by Agnès Varda, which is a film I absolutely adore. And I didn't consciously think about that, but it's true that I think there are films, and you probably know this yourself, in relation to your own work, there are films which are they're now in there somewhere in your head. And even if you don't think about them, mention them, talk about them, when you start writing, those passions somehow show up. So I didn't I do when I make films, generally speaking, have ideas. Like, for example, I usually have scenes and I think about, this is the sort of style for that scene. So I'll just give you an example off the top of my head. The scene in the dream sequence, I thought about, oh bugger, I've forgotten the title.
That happens to me all the time.
Oh dear, I should have written that down. It's Russian.
Dolls?
No, attends, ça va revenir. Oh my god, the one film that I wanted to remember and I've forgotten it.
Maybe we'll
Anyway,
come.
the point is, there was the scene with the cards is that famous scene, which is the opening for Clio 5 à 7 by Agnès Varda. I didn't purpose it, but it was an influence. So I do love Italian cinema, and I even mention Antonioni at the end. So I suppose I was more thinking about Tarkovsky, and the scene in the wood was, I thought about Tarkovsky, and the scene, what's the scene where they go into the magic land and they're crossing the it's not Nomad, it's not Persona. Anyway, you know the film. I'm sure
Yeah,
I'm
I don't
sure
remember which.
you remember when they actually filmed it in a nuclear site, and they go into this space, and it's all very crazy, but you don't see anything crazy, but it's like an energy. It's like I've forgotten the title, but anyway, there were specific ideas about specific scenes, not to reproduce those scenes, but just to give a point of reference to the cameraman or to the writer, or we're co-writing, but just so we're on the same page. So there were references, but it was never like, obviously Pasolini is a huge reference for me, but it was never like, let's do it in the style of this. No, but Huit et demi was referenced at the very beginning. So there is something about that, and the sort of cross and everything. There is something about that film, but I purposefully don't watch the films that I think about purposefully, because I think, oh god, you get into that danger of then redoing. Do you know what I mean? So I just allow it to be in there somewhere, and let there be a color of that, but at all costs try and just let it go.
And I think that comes with just like time. And I don't know. I remember when I first started writing, I'm just kind of trying to ape other things, and then realize like, no, I don't need to do that. I can do. They can just be, like you said, a color.
Exactly.
So we've been talking about the poignant side of the film. I'm going to kind of like talk about the playful side as well. So there's this character that we've mentioned, Elizabeth. She's a character who's kind of the typical British tourist, or like kind of that type. Meets her in a bar. And so what about Elizabeth? What about her mistaken flirtation with him, or obsession with Paris? How does it alter the way that he sees himself, but also the way he sees the city?
Well, it's interesting because in actual fact, it was, I suppose, from a writing perspective, and also, from the film itself, it was a way of not only introducing Richard as an English man in Paris, because I think if he'd spoken French immediately, for those that would have heard the accent and it would have been spoken about, I think it would have changed something. But to see him in his own language, speaking with someone from his own country, already gives an insight into who he is. Before we get really, he has spoke French a bit at the beginning, but before we get, okay, this is an English guy. And Elizabeth was also, so Elizabeth allows him to do that. But at the same time, Elizabeth is also the foreigner, as he is ultimately, is the foreigner in Paris with all the cliches of what it is to be Parisian, the Parisian men, the Parisian people, the building, we even talk about it. So there was this sort of, I suppose it was like allowing the audience and also allowing us to talk about the cliches as English people within Paris. Me, who has been here for a while and speaks French, to her, I sound French. And then for me, to her, to be also reminded of the fact that I'm English, also to allow, I suppose, from the fun perspective with regards to that character, I should add, I don't think you need to know this to enjoy the scene, but I'm just telling you, Nina was a very, 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 very close friend when I was 18. And we actually went to drama school together. She was in the year below me because she came later. I was like, you've got to come to this drama school, because she wasn't having fun at the drama school she was at. And she did. And we've been friends for many, many years. So, and when we met, I came out with her. I mean, that was the period when I was 18 and I was starting to admit that I'm gay. And we went to the first gay club together. And I suppose what I wanted to do in this film, and I worked with Nina, and I said, ultimately, I want to try and get at our relationship, what we actually have for real, because that's what will read for real if we start pretending to be. So I tried to work with her, and I think we succeeded, to get at our real relationship, because in actual fact, we've known each other for 35 years. So that playful side of it, which was in the writing, was very, very easy, because, like, for example, when I say, oh, look at your cleavage, and she bursts out laughing, that wasn't even in the script, but I did it. And that's the sort of thing. And that Nina laughing at that point that's who Nina is. That is her. And I kept it in, and I'm so glad we got it.
Yeah.
But we wanted to create the playful side as well, not only to make it a bit lighter in the contrast of her coming to Paris having this possible illness, but also to show the sort of joy of that relationship. And I don't know about you, but that does happen to me when you meet someone. And I mean, it's funny because Bino, who plays the guide in The Dream, said to me, it's funny because I've always known that's your Paris, as in that's how you experience Paris. And I suppose that struck me, and I thought, oh gosh, it is true, because I've always been quite solitary, but I've always met people. Like that one night is for me is okay. It doesn't all happen in one night, but it is very real for me. So, and within that, like you say, is the darker side, but there's also the really fun, sort of compassionate, connecting with people, meeting people who aren't in your world that you wouldn't necessarily connect with. So it was also getting that out to make it as real as possible, because life isn't only glug and it isn't only fun. And it was like trying to make it as real as I possibly could within a script, within a film, which isn't real, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Just a few more questions. I think we're like, our time is coming to almost an end, but we still have a few more questions.
Okay.
In that conversation with Elizabeth, you, at one point you say that, oh, I'm being French. And so he means something at first with her, but I felt like the film also, it encapsulated what maybe being French for him actually is by the end. Do you feel, what's the difference between what he means at first and maybe what happens to him in the film?
When you say that, do you mean, I understand what you mean about being French at that point, but you talking about how he ends the film, or you're talking about how he goes through the film from there on?
Yeah, I guess I don't want to give away the ending. It's hard for me to ask this question without giving away the ending, but I guess I just feel like like, for instance, someone who is French says that, oh, you have a British accent, or people say he has a British accent, so he is this loner figure. But it seems like he's not only getting closer to himself during the night. He seems to be getting closer to the city and actually being able to kind of almost become part of it. At least that's how I saw it. I don't know,
Yeah,
maybe it's
yeah.
not.
No,
But
that's
I
true.
just wondered, like, at first, what does he mean by that? And then maybe does that change
Well,
from
I think at first what I meant by that in a very real sort of way is that coming from England for the first 5 years, I've been here now for nearly 20 years, well, maybe a bit less, but around about that. For the first 5 years, I wasn't happy here. I didn't like it. I just found it difficult. I didn't speak the language. I mean, I was learning, but I didn't really speak it. I found it very difficult, and I found the French very volatile, and very like, just a silly example. Like sometimes you'd go in the post office all happy, and the guy then would start screaming at you because you didn't have the right paper, whatever it is. I'm not saying it's like this across the board. I'm just saying that I had a few experiences like this. And the French can be quite mouthy and volatile. The Parisians can be, if you're pissing them off, they'll let you know. Whereas I suppose I'd come from England, and it's, you don't say, you keep it to yourself. So I wasn't used to this sort of like being confronted and coming out feeling so, oh my God, I'm a bad person. I shouldn't. And this happened so much that I started, I hate it here. I hate it. I want to leave. And I suppose that phrase incline, it was something that I lived. It was something that I felt at the time. I felt aggressed. I'm not saying there aren't amazing things and I've stayed and lived here because I love it, and I chose to stay here, but I'm just saying what I experienced at the beginning.
Sure.
And I suppose that makes reference to that period. And then as time went along, in my personal life, I started to become less English and more French. And rather than saying sorry every 2 seconds, which the English have a tendency of doing, oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. You're like, why are you saying sorry? I started I started to say, why am I saying sorry? I haven't done anything wrong. So perhaps in a way, it gave me a bit more peps, a bit more, However, as he goes through the film, because we're ultimately talking about the film, I think it's funny because my ex who watched it, another ex who lives in the same building, said, "Oh, it's Paris is a personnage dans le film."
we
And I think that joins exactly what you're saying. It's he starts to fall in love again with Paris, with the city, he starts to fall in love with himself in Paris, and Paris itself, because it's although there are these connections, he's also very solitary. But his companion is Paris. And I think as he goes from darkness to light, literally, because he literally goes from night to day. So he literally goes from darkness to light, through the dark towards the light. He is cocooned by Paris, and within Paris, he meets actually these wonderful characters, and you actually get to know these people, some more sort of sweeter than others. But I think it's the transformation within him as a character. It's also his vision of Paris, and it's also Paris that is carrying him along. It's also Paris that is giving him the answers. So there's this sort of, initially at the beginning, I've not really thought about this before, but now you're saying it, it seems quite clear. That initially there's been this sort of, do I want to be here? Am I actually happy where I am right now? Do I want to be in this city? Do I actually like the French? Is this where I want to go to? Actually, this is where I am, and this is the right place, and I'm here, and I'm now, and I'm happy, and I love Paris, and seeing the beauty of it. His character is experiencing, as if for the first time, although it's obviously not, but the beauty of the city.
Well, that's a beautiful way of ending. I just have kind of one question just to bring us to your next chapter. I mean, you're going to be doing a lot of probably a lot of work on this film itself. Do you have a sense of what this new chapter will be? Where do you think you're going to go from here?
Well, what I do know is that I've written 2 dramas. And right now, not because I should, but because I want to, because I'm ready to, I I started with this film. I wanted to attack words, drama, storylines. I want to attack acting. The next film I don't want to be in. I just want to I want to direct. But I'm definitely well, right now I'm heading towards drama. I'm heading towards what would be considered to be a more traditional movie. Not because I should, not because that's how I'll get funding, not because, although hopefully that will help because I've never had any funding, but I'm definitely moving towards a more traditional. That's not going to stop me from doing a more creative or artistic project or anything. But right now I have 3 films, 2 that are written after this one. Well, this one is done, so 2 more are written, 2 scripts, and they're definitely more traditional dramas. But you know, I had to do what I had to do in order to get to this point, to get to this bridge. And I didn't think purposefully, oh, I'm going to do this and do a chapter, and that will be the next chapter. It's just the work itself has brought me on along that road, and I just have got to the point now where I'm ready to do something else. You know, I went to the end of what I needed to do with Frig, which was my film before this one. And this is the bridge into moving into a new world, a new style, a more traditional narrative. But even in Down in Paris, all the magic of what I'd done before is still there. It's just been not muted, but it's been made a little bit more accessible and evident and easier. Whereas before I was perhaps doing my rock and roll, I don't give a fuck. I'm doing what I want. Whereas perhaps I'm also 46. Maybe I'm calming down a bit. Who knows? But either way, there are 2 dramas. One is a play that has been adapted from an English playwright. And the second is a fait divers anglais, set in a prison. And yeah, so we'll see where we go from there. But I've always gone with the idea of go with the instinct, go with the energy, go what you're ready to do right now. And then you'll be at the right place that you're meant to be. I'm not forcing or doing it because I should. I'm doing what I need to do right now, and I'm where I need to be right now.
Amazing. Well, that's a perfect end to this. Thank you so much for your time for this film. I really hope people go. It's not only it's going to kind of move you, but it's also just incredibly enjoyable. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And thanks for coming, guys.